Okay, welcome all. I would like to welcome you to this month's VERB seminar. As most of you already probably know, the VERB seminar series has now been incorporated into the new IHEA special interest group on the economics of risky health behaviors. We're aiming for one talk each month on the first Monday of the month. And I also, before we start, I would like to encourage you to join the SIG. You can do that by going to the IHEA website and logging into your account and then adding this special interest group. But I also wanted to let you know that you do not have to be a member of IHEA or of the Economics of Risky Behaviors special interest group to receive announcements and to attend these this seminar series. So we encourage you to get on the mailing list, and there's not a specific reason to be an IHEA member to do that. And before we start, for practical reasons, I just wanted to let you know that all participants are generally muted during the talk, but that doesn't mean that we don't encourage you to participate in the seminar. It's going to be Hans who is going to keep an eye on the chat box as well as raised hands. So please direct questions to Hans. He is about to log in, but if something happens, and you can also direct the questions to me. And so we will just interrupt the speaker and when at times that we feel are appropriate for him to answer questions and when it seems relevant. So I would also like to just remind you that this is being recorded and it will be posted on the internet. And so then I would like to introduce our speaker, Professor Holger Strulik. He's going to give a presentation that's titled COVID-19 and the Economics of Aging and Longevity. Professor Strulik he's a professor of macroeconomics and development economics at the University of Göttingen. I mean, he has, he has a long CV, done a lot of different things, editorial roles and so forth, but maybe what I think is most appropriate is that he has proposed a new approach to human health and longevity that considers health status from the medical viewpoint as an accumulation of health deficits and illnesses and functional limitations and so forth. So I think it's going to be, I'm very much looking forward to your talk, Holger Strulik. With that, the virtual floor is yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity. I just share my screen. So can you see this now? Very good. All right. So this talk is my main ambition was actually to refine the view of health and health economics. But since this, so that would be kind of a methodological contribution. But since this is perhaps too boring, there's also an application to all of this, and this is the impact of the COVID pandemic on the future of aging and longevity. So methodologically, the motivation is to distinguish between infectious and chronic diseases, which are very different. And this is also the main classification. If you look at, I don't know, the Global Burden and Disease Study or whatever, yeah, main classification of diseases, and they are very different because infectious diseases is what we usually get, relatively age independent. Everybody gets them, and then the body fights them, and then the disease goes away in most cases. Whereas chronic diseases are different. Their prevalence increases with age, and they don't go away so easily. And actually, we get more and more of them as we become older. so very different things, but I would like to have them both and then investigate how they are related. So that's kind of the goal of all this. And the motivation is that it hasn't been done before, basically. So if I look at my own approach, the health deficit model, this is, I don't know whether we ever said this so explicitly, but it's basically the accumulation of chronic health deficits that we consider, because the frailty index, kind of the empirical object of health that the model models, is built on chronic aging-related health deficits. And then there's a very early study by Cropper, from which we got a bit of inspiration for what is coming, who models illnesses as random shocks. But then I think this is more or less it. And then if you look at the kind of literature built on the old paradigm, the capital model, there I think there's basically nothing, because already has capital is kind of difficult, and hard to decompose in infectious and chronic diseases. So that's basically the idea. And so this will be a life cycle model with infectious and chronic diseases, and the interaction implements into health economics two phenomena which are known and discussed and prominent in gerontology and the biology of human aging, and they come under the terms immunosenescence and inflammaging. And I explain in a minute what this is. And then, as I said, the application would be the COVID pandemic. So we have done some, once this is implemented in the life cycle model, we can do some comparative dynamics, how the disease affects lifetime health given certain preconditions or certain protection attitudes, which is probably basic, particularly relevant for this audience. And then one main goal is also to get rid of chronological age, explaining the severity of infections, because then we can actually say, no, it's not the chronological age, but it are the preconditions in the health deficits that people have that make them more severely affected by COVID infections. And so that's kind of the basic thing. And then if I have time, I would also like to talk about the role of false beliefs, that the people think differently about the COVID virus than it behaves, in the starkest way. That would be kind of a corona denier, let's say. How this affects lifetime health. And then I also would like to explore the long COVID phenomenon with this new tool. So that's kind of a lot, but let's hope I can show you most of it. So here's I call it recap slide, but maybe many have not kind of heard about this health deficit approach. So everything is integrated in there, and this is basically one slide on the main insights from there. And the idea is that this is built on a kind of, as it was said in the introduction, a kind of natural science view on aging, and built on this definition in the biology of aging, as aging as the intrinsic, cumulative, progressive, and deleterious loss of function that culminates in death. That's kind of their description of the life cycle model. And very sad. It basically goes down all the way, but in a specific way. And to show this, we also use the frailty index, also produced in the natural science by Mitnitsky and Rockwood. And the frailty index basically just counts the relative number of health deficits that we have from a long list. So everybody after the talk can go home and ask his mother or grandmother how many health deficits she has, and then we will have a list prepared, and then we just count, she has 10% of all the potential health deficits. And that's the frailty index. And when you look at this, one feature is that it increases exponentially with age. So this is from the original authors here, a study, and the small lines are just the particular cohorts in the Canadian hospital. But once you kind of average it, you see a basically continuous accumulation of health deficits with age. At 60, they have average 10, and at 90, 30%. So this would be a log linear relationship, very easy to do regressions with. If you write it down, it's kind of an exponential increase with age. That would be t here, and mu would be the rate. The rate is something between 3 and 4%, but I try to convince you that it is not age causing it. But there's an very easy way to solve this problem, because then I just take the first derivative of the equation, and then I have the second equation, which says the change in health deficits is a linear function of the health deficits that are already there. So the health deficits that one has is a very good predictor of those that will come. And I think this is also very intuitive. If somebody has already, I don't know, hypertension and arthrosis, he probably doesn't do a lot of exercise, and then next come heart problems and so on. So this is so the presence of health deficits is conducive to new health deficits, and this, you see that this is automatically then generates this intrinsic, cumulative, and progressive accumulation of health deficits. And then we need just a relation with survival or mortality, and then we also get how this loss of function culminates in death. So that's basically the idea there. And this is already, I wrote a lot of papers out of this idea. It all financed my living, I could say, the last 10 years. But now comes the new thing, and this is immunosenescence. So if you followed me until now, you agree that basically that's the way we are. We just deteriorate as we get older. Then you also agree this will also affect the immune system. So the immune system as such also gets older, and then with less functional. So in the innate immune system, the pathogens are not recognized as effectively as they were. There is inefficient macrophage activation in the adaptive. These are just examples. In the adaptive immune system, the number and diversity of B and T cells declines. The thymus, that's the organ where the T cells then kind of produce, has lost 60% of its initial size at age 65, and you can imagine that only because of this, there will be less of these naive T cells around that could fight the infection. Also, the epithelial barriers get thinner. Skin is the best example. The pathogens can enter the body more easily, and when the skin gets thinner, but every organ is basically also surrounded by skin. And then it's also easier of the pathogens to enter the organs. So, and then in a healthy person, I don't know, the virus gets breathed in and breathed out, but if the barrier is very thin, then the virus enters, for example, the lung in the long COVID patient, and then wreaks havoc there. So that's one example. And as a result, mortality from influenza increases 100-fold from age 40 to age 85. But as I said, it is not because the guy got chronologically older by 45 years, but because his health deteriorated so much until then. That's basically the idea. And inflammation, that was the second new term. That means that the immune system functions, but not as it should. So in the inflammation as such is basically a good thing when we have it. We cut our finger and the skin gets red, or we get an infection and have a headache or so on. A good sign that the body is fighting the disease, and then when the disease is fought, everything goes back to normal. That's basically our understanding of an acute infection. But as people become more frail, the inflammation gets kind of more like a persistent state. There is inflammation without a reason, and this is has a effect on chronic health. So this persistent inflammation and this kind of cytokines and chemokines and all this kind of molecules that are around are then doing stuff that they shouldn't do, enter organs, for example, and reduce organ reserve, and eventually diseases in all kinds of organic systems. And in this sense, if we had more infections in our life, and used our immune system more frequently, then we, on average, reach this pro-inflammatory state earlier, and this then contributes to the accumulation of chronic health deficits. That's basically the idea there. All right, this would be kind of my introductory motivation of it. And now comes the model, and we consider this is a partial equilibrium. This is just one guy, but with parameter variations, it could be a different one. So in this person experiences lifetime utility from instantaneous utility from consumption, as we always have. Here is the first element in the square brackets. But then because it's a talk on disease protection, I also have protective behavior, P. That's a choice variable in the utility function. And then the omega is a parameter, a preference parameter that measures how much the guy dislikes protection. if it doesn't like wear masks all the time or not in the supermarket or whatever. And then all this is discounted to the present with the time preference. But then this is expected utility, and everything is multiplied with the probability to be still alive at the particular age t when the utility is experienced. So nothing really new except this protection behavior. And then the change of the survival rate. So this is basically could be conceptualized as a stop. We are still alive at t because we didn't die before. So the rate of change of the survival probability is the minus of the mortality rate. Now that's the definition of a mortality rate. But the mortality rate, I try to convince you, doesn't depend on our chronological age, but on our health deficits. So it is the mortality depending on the health deficits that we have at age t. And then for the talk of today, I further decompose this into mortality from chronic diseases and from infectious diseases. And then I have my first law of motion for this model. And then if I first consider mortality from chronic diseases, there's a very strong power law between health deficits and mortality of chronic diseases, with an exponent of roughly 3. So we got to 2.8 in our estimates, which means basically when this is an elasticity. If health deficits increase by 1%, then mortality increases by 3%. And we estimated it from a health deficit index constructed from the Global Burden and Disease Study, and then mortality data from the Human Mortality Database for the countries where this data was available. And then when you look at it, it is already there in the raw data. But then when we control for country fixed effects and period fixed effects, the estimate hardly changes. But this is nice. This has probably the nice side effect for you, because now I can offer also an explanation for Gompert's law. Gompert's law, probably most or everybody in the audience know this. It says that the mortality increases exponentially with age, and in particular at the rate of 9 to 10%. No matter where we look. If we look in Germany, USA, or India, that's kind of the stylized fact used by insurance companies and so on. But then the question is, why is this so? Why 9 to 10%? Could be any number. And the answer here is, well, if I look at the US Americans, the data I use later, I find that they, on average, they accumulate health deficits at 3.54% per year. Then I multiply this with my 2.8, and then I get 9.5. That's the Gompert's mortality rate. Or here in the graphic, in the picture, this shows age and health deficits. Now that's kind of the average accumulation of health deficits of male Americans. And then this is this power law between health deficits and the mortality rate. Then I just feed in here the health deficits by age, and then I get Gompert's law. Here for convenience already in the log scale, now to show you this, how it is, we find it in the textbooks usually. The log linear association between age and the mortality rate. Once I have the mortality rate, I can integrate over all mortality rates. Then I get the survival, and then get the survival probability. That's the relative number of a cohort that is already that is still there at a given age, and this declines in a particular fashion. Here the blue line would be the prediction of the model, and the circles would be then the data for American men. So, but this is just as a nice implication of all this. Now, if we now come to infectious diseases, so this is as I said, this is a bit inspired by Cropper's paper from the 1970s. Well, and the idea is that we are continuously exposed to pathogens, infectious shocks. But they come in different sizes. And most of these shocks are so small that we don't even notice them. Yeah? The body fights them and we don't even notice them. Sometimes some we notice and then we are sick for a while, but sometimes are so severe that they are also affecting our mortality. And when I had my COVID infection, I thought I would be severely infected, but this was only biased perception, because only those who got hospitalized were considered to be severely affected. So, and then the idea is that there is a Pareto distribution of these shocks, these potential shocks of their size, and if they have above a particular size, we are severely infected. But where this threshold is depends on the health deficits that we have. Yeah? And this is kind of the notion of this immunosenescence. If we have a lot of health deficits, as a year with the guy with 10% of deficits, this is already a smaller exposure to infection is sufficient to be severely affected. And then with this parameter B, this curve shifts out, and this would be then the severity of the infectious disease as such, experienced by everyone. Yeah? So the curve shifts out for everyone, but then where the health deficits depend where we are. And then when I do the calculation, I get my personal severity of infection, as a multiple of the severity of the disease, which depends, if we look at corona, for example, on the particular variant of the virus, or the incidents in our city or whatnot. And then it also depends on the health deficits that I have. That's kind of then my personal impact on the probability of having a severe infection.
Holger, can I ask two questions?
Yes.
So one is, to what extent do you think it is restrictive that, let's say, all of the severity is sort of purely coming from deficits and not through age itself? Like, is there really sort of very solid evidence that all of it is really through deficits and not just frailty coming with age itself?
No, why should it? Yeah. So I think if you read the biology books, they say we can explain aging once we got rid of age in the equation. This is, of course, very empirically, that's very difficult to have a full that age doesn't play a role, but that's there because why should it play a role? But the message is a good one, because the chronological age is given, it's inevitable. Next year I get a year older, but my health deficits, they are malleable. That's kind of at least partially also a choice, how healthy I am. So this is kind of actually good news, I would say, that it is the health deficits and not chronological age by which we die.
But I mean, there are exceptions, right? If you think about things like fertility, then independent of your health state, there's
yes, there are exceptions. One of, for example, violence. If I got in a traffic accident, then this is not necessarily health deficit related. But I would go so far that I would say even there, because if I'm healthy, I cross the street very quickly. If I'm unhealthy, and maybe also my cognitive abilities are not so good anymore, the probability increases that I get hit by a car.
Okay.
So even there, it is not, maybe war. So getting killed in war could be kind of a mortality that is not aging, health deficit related. But this is all ignored here, or getting killed by a meteorite falling on Earth. So these are, but most people don't die of this. Most people die because of health issues.
Right. And then the second question is, I think during COVID, we learned that it's actually quite specific which people are more vulnerable to certain types of infections, right? Like people with, for example, obesity, or people with certain sort of lung conditions or asthma. So is it restrictive to say that it's sort of independent of which deficits, but that it's really sort of a function of the count of deficits?
Yes. I mean, that's a nice question. For today, it is an independent, but we could imagine that in a richer model, there is also an effect of obesity, additionally, on the health deficits, because the obese people have a different physiology, and there could be an effect from there as well. So, but not in my talk after. But if you think obesity should play a role, then I think you are invited to kind of refine this further.
All right, thanks.
Okay, so this is then the mortality of infectious diseases, but this is always kind of potential mortality because we have the probability to protect ourselves. Now, this is not yet included in there. So now I include here with this move the probability to that part of the potential infections don't happen because I'm protected. And this depends on the technology, and my protective behavior. And there I impose a particular function, because what I want to have is an optimal dose. If I can wear a face mask, and I had a colleague who actually wore 2 face masks, and maybe he got a bit more protection, but I had never seen anybody wearing 10 face masks. So there's a clear limit of what's good. And this is reached with this particular inverse exponential function for protection efficacy. So here's then protection in the A, that's exogenous medical technology. That is how much protection I can get. And if there are only face masks, for example, I can get as much as 25%. But then if vaccines become available, I can get 85%. But same applies. So I can get better protection if I have a second and third vaccination. But if I already had 5, probably I don't get much better when I have 10. So this is here then implemented for kind of the efficacy of protection. So that's that. And then I come back to the health deficit index, which I also have developed here in steps, because this is, I start with the purely gerontological view of the authors who invented all this, where I said the health deficits that I newly get depend on those that I already have, and here plus some error terms additional shocks. And then in the old or the existing health deficit model, we took into account that we can reduce this with health investments, with decreasing returns. Here also, the efficacy depends on the state of health deficits. That has mainly reasons of fitting the model, but can be also defended. But the main parameter here is the A, also for later, how good in general medical technology is to reduce health deficits by health expenditure. So, for example, if you have arthrosis and hip problems, but when that would reduce your health deficits, but when the A is big enough and you make the expenditure, then the health deficit doesn't happen. And that's the idea here. And the more you spend with decreasing returns, the more a reduction of health deficits you get. And the parameter A shows how large this reduction is. This is the basic idea of the health deficit model as it is. But now I have also this inflammaging component that the severe diseases that I experience also contribute to the accumulation of health deficits. That's basically the new part here. And then I have almost everything together, but what is left is the dynamic budget constraint. So the guy gets earnings from labor income before retirement and pensions afterwards. That is then he gets a return on his assets. The part of the assets is held in form of annuities, and then all this income is spent on consumption, on protection from infectious diseases, and on health investments. And the pies are the prices, and the phi's are the out-of-pocket ratios or co-payments. And then what's left, that increases wealth of the guy. So this is basically standard. So there's nothing new here. And then I'm done. So that's the model. That's the solution. I suggest that we don't talk too much about it, but you see, here it's a solution for protection. If I don't like protection or the price is high, I protect less. If I'm rich and consume a lot, I protect more. I've had lots of health deficits, I protect less, and so on. So it makes sense. This is here my standard Ramsey rule or Euler equation for consumption. Then I get a very messy expression for dynamic equation for health investments. And annoyingly, I also don't get rid of the shadow price of survival. So, and this is why I suggest that we can talk some sense into it, but not in short time. So that I just suggest that we continue with a numerical solution of it. So, and this the idea is, so once I specify the parameters of the model, I get a unique solution that carries me from my initial state to death. That's life.
Holger, there's a question from Davide.
Yes.
Just to see whether I understand correctly, protection and health investment are substitutes here in the production of health deficits. Is that correct?
The difficult to say. They are also complements, huh?
Yeah, I mean, just in the D dot equation, I think in the 2 slides before.
Here, yes.
Yeah, here, no? That they interact with a minus sign.
Yes. If you look at it this way, yes, I agree. Yes.
Technologically, yes.
Yes.
Okay. And health, so protection has also utility cost, while health investment only has a role in the budget constraint together with protection.
Yes.
Okay, so they're not identical. They're not one-to-one. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So all this this is kind of the minimal approach. Yeah? All this could be made more complicated. I could also write the health into the utility function. Would make sense. But here it is kind of the simplest possible.
The difficult thing is to make the model simple, not complicated.
Exactly. Yeah. So this was the most the easiest I found. That's the way to see it. But yes, thanks for the comment. They are actually in the budget constraint. They are perfect complements both in the health deficit equation. So then we get the life cycle trajectory, and our benchmark guy will be a 20 years old American man, 20 years old in 2010. So we have to decide who it is, and then with different sets of parameters, we can then model women, richer or poorer persons, and whatever. So, and then I set a series of parameters. And probably they all make sense. I don't go through them. But one is this protection aversion, which is low but not zero, and this is to model. This is all before COVID, I should say. This is what this behavior on flu vaccination, which is basically non-existent for very young adults, but then almost perfect for very old adults. And this behavior is generated if there is a bit of protection aversion. You will see this in a minute. So some parameters are just set. Then I estimate or determine these set of parameters by fitting particular data points, namely the actual accumulation of health deficits over a lifetime, the actual survival curve, the health expenditure of American men at particular ages, and the age profile of deaths from lower respiratory infection. If you count it with me, then you would notice these are not all parameters. So I have this problem, unfortunately, that I have too free. And this is, and then both are very interesting and important, which is medical technology A and this inflammaging parameter. So now comes kind of the bold step of all this, how to figure this out. And there we said, okay, let's backward predict the health history of the Americans, the epidemiological transition from 1850 to now, and feed into the model the wage growth, the government share of health expenditure, and determine the disease protection technology and disease prevalence to fit the actual mortality rate from infectious diseases. And once I have that, and then determine the value of B and the path of the A, such that the model explains the whole epidemiological transition. How life expectancy increased from 42 years to 77. So there are no degrees from freedom. There's no role for violence, for example, in any other channels. And then this is the outcome here. So there's not so much time to explain also. So this is the this is the epidemiological transition here in the lower left. The black is the data, and then this is a Spanish flu, the outlier, but it comes kind of down in kind of logistic form, and this the blue line is then the calibrated infectious disease mortality. Here are the underlying prevalence and of disease and efficacy of technology. Naturally, also kind of logistic curves. Here's the imputed wage. Here is the implied medical technology path, of which for today, I'd only take the last point. Here is the out-of-pocket ratio for health expenditure, and here's the predicted life expectancy. And as I said, all of the increase in life expectancy is explained. And you see, since the epidemiological transition from infectious diseases ends basically in 1950, we would say the first part is explained by infectious diseases in their decline, and the second part is explained by medical progress in chronic health treatment. So this was a lot of just getting two parameters, and that's what we also thought. So that and then we used this for some extra thinking about. We did some historical counterfactual experiments in the sense of Robert Vogel, and said, if this is true, how would American history look like if there was no technological progress in disease eradication, or there was no medical progress in chronic health, or there was no income growth, etc. And this is just published a week ago in the Economics and Human Biology. So this is not for today. For today, it's the only purpose was to get all parameters, which I know have. For example, this inflammation parameter is 7.5. But what does it mean? So to get the meaning, we need to kind of do experiments with the model. So here's the life cycle pre-COVID of our benchmark guy. So health deficits are accumulated, infectious disease mortality increases, survival probability declines, health expenditure increases. And then the circles would again be the targeted data points here. The green line is one who has no disease protection aversion at all. And you see this doesn't make a big difference. The red line here is one that absolutely hates protection. And you see there's a lot of difference. So in particular here, since age 60, health deficits accumulate at a faster rate. It's visibly at a faster rate. So they diverge. Also, infectious disease mortality goes up big time, and survival is lower. And here is the protection behavior. So this was kind of this is what I would like to implement. The no protection in the young age and a perfect protection given the technology in old age, and then adjustment in between. You see, this is the guy who does no protection aversion at all, protects already almost perfectly in young age, but to no avail or very little. But the guy who hates protection has no until he's very old and very much likely to get a severe infection, and he has not even so he is long dead, expected to be dead before he reaches these high levels of protection. The life expectancy, by the way, of the benchmark guy is 77 years. Okay, so now comes the COVID pandemic. And how would we model this? And we start with the end and follow the idea of many, nobody knows how it ends, but many scientists say at the end, COVID will be just another flu. So we add another flu to the disease environment. But until we reach this endemic state, it's of course much more severe. And then we calibrate this disease prevalence parameter B and the protection technology A such that we match the age pattern of infectious disease mortality, including COVID in 2020 and 2022. And then we get a path for the efficacy of protection and the disease environment. The blue line is the benchmark run. This has a half-life of 2.5 years. The model predicts half of the pandemic is over after 2.5 years, but this can be then also changed in more optimistic and pessimistic scenarios, as for example, those by the dashed red lines. All right, and this is then the infectious disease mortality by age. The blue line was before COVID. Then we have the red line in the first year, the dashed red line after 2 years. And then as time proceeds further, the red comes closer to the blue, but doesn't fully reach the blue because we have another flu. That's the idea. And then we can do the actual experiments. For example, consider somebody who gets hit by such a COVID shock at age 75. And then disease mortality goes up big time. Protection goes down, although the guy tries to protect more. But the efficacy of protection is so low that actually protection goes down. Health expenditure goes up. Because now it becomes even more important to be in good health, but we don't see so much in health deficits. Only very little, but numerically it matters. So this would be then the predictions here. The benchmark guy loses life expectancy of basically a third of a year. His infectious disease mortality in the year of the pandemic increases by 0.5 percentage points. His chronic disease, now that's basically known, but the chronic disease mortality rate is 0.5 percentage points higher 10 years after the disease. So that's the legacy. If I here take away the calibrated inflammaging, we see that this is what basically we read in the papers. We get the standard result, and there's a very little effect on life expectancy, basically a month. It takes away. So most of the loss comes from its impact on chronic diseases. The guy who doesn't protect, very little protection, that's this time, compared to himself, he also loses just a third of a year. But compared to the benchmark guy in the disease, he loses 4 years. So that's kind of a lot, I would say. Most of it comes through that this guy doesn't protect also before and after the pandemic. He's a consistent high exposure to diseases. Interesting is also here, if we compare this one here in case 7, we have the benchmark guy, but in 25% healthier. Then the mortality rate in the pandemic from infections is much lower, but also the effect on life expectancy is lower, by the benchmark guy. And then if we could compare this with a different guy who gets the disease, the pandemic at age 60, but is less healthy, 25% less healthy, that he has the same loss of life expectancy. And this is kind of the modest representation that it is health and not chronic chronological age that is decisive for the impact of the infectious diseases. And compared to a benchmark, this guy loses even more, because he experiences the disease earlier, and then this has a greater effector to play a role for chronic diseases in the remaining life.
Holger, there's about 3 minutes left.
Okay, so this is just summarizes what I said. I stopped the false beliefs. Yeah, I can send you the slides if you write me. And I spent the 3 minutes for long COVID, because this is probably not known by you or everybody, that this is really super severe. Here's a long-term study of long COVID, from which we computed the frailty index. So the frailty index of the people who experienced long COVID is 25% higher than of those who didn't. And this is computed from 80 health deficits 2 years after infection. So this is, unfortunately, we cannot go further because there is no data. And this is experienced by 10% of the population. PASC is the medical term for long COVID. And when we put this into the model, we see this is just massive. This is everything I talked about before is dwarfed by this. So this is really a massive health shock. And the bad news here is this doesn't go away. It gets more severe. Naturally, because once you have some health deficits, they lead to the development of further health deficits. If you have fatigue and do not do lots of cognitive exercises, or if you have joint pain all the time and do not do physical exercises, it's easy to see how then these health deficits relate to the accumulation of further health deficits. So this is a very bad outlook for the future, and I would say underappreciated in most of the literature. Of course, there is hope that this will be easier in future generations, because since this is 2 years ago, they also had the earlier, more severe viruses, and they were not vaccinated, and all this, there is some hope that all this contributes that these chronic health shock from long COVID will not be so large if we experience it later. But for these guys who got it early, this is really a life changer. So they lose 4 years, the model says. And here you see, here it reverses. The guy who gets it at 75 loses 4 years, but the guy who gets it at age 45 loses more than 6. And why is this so? Well, because he has more remaining lifetime left for this extra health deficits to play a role in the accumulation of further health deficits. And I should just stop. Yeah, I hope that I was clear enough that you got my conclusions, and then for not to cause overtime, I just stop here.
Many thanks, Holger. I want to give the opportunity to one of the audience members to ask a question still to Holger, if there are any. Well, if not, then maybe we can just, Tina, can you just sort of stop here, and then we can maybe linger on a little bit after the talk.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Holger, for a fantastic talk. But before we continue discussing this,